You're listening to TFM.
Want to join in the conversation and share your thoughts on this episode? Join the Babel Conference, our listeners' discussion group on Facebook. Just type BABEL into the Facebook search field, and we'll look forward to seeing you there.
Hey everyone, I'm Rod Roddenberry, and you're listening to Trek FM.
Are you taking all these books? I thought I'd take some light reading. Guess I got bored.
Welcome to TFM's local books and comic show for Star Trek, and I'm just one of the hosts here, Matthew Rushing, and I'm so excited to be here with none other than associate producer, Casey Pettitt.
Hello.
Hey, man, how are you?
I'm good. It's good to be back. It's been a little while since we've been here together.
I know. It is good to be back, and I'm excited because we've got some comics to talk about, and we've got a new book series we're starting on, so it is an eventful day. But before we get to that, of course, just want to say thank you to everybody for listening. We really appreciate it. And whatever platform you're on, just make sure you're subscribed so you get the show as soon as it drops. You can also help us out by reviewing us in places where that's possible, like Apple Podcasts, or maybe giving us a star rating on Spotify. All of those things help. You can also find us online at Trek.fm on Twitter or on Facebook at Facebook.com/TrekFM. We're also on Instagram at TrekFM. You can find the Listeners Only discussion group and talk to listeners from all over the world on the Babel Conference. That's a Facebook group. And you can find the website at Trek.fm. And then if you do like all of the shows that we do here on the network, like Casey, as well as Greg Rosier, you can become a associate producer here through Patreon and make sure that all of the podcasts that we're doing here keep coming to you each and every week. We really do want to continue to grow the network, and we can only do that with listeners like you. So go to patreon.com/TrekFM and see how you can become part of the team. So, Casey, I mentioned that we have a couple of comics. The one that has come out is the kind of one. It's not a one shot, but it's basically like a one off for the Mirror War. And this one focuses on Geordi LaForge. And like the Data one, I'm really interested to hear, kind of what you thought of this issue.
I almost wish that these issues were what the whole Mirror War saga was, just these little snapshots into some of these characters, because I feel like this Geordi one especially works just a lot better than the series has been working for us so far. This one, I feel like they tried to tie in a little bit more to the overall story, but just getting this view into Geordi and into the Mirror Geordi was a lot better than even the Data one that we got, I feel like, because it really gave you a really good in-depth view of this Mirror Geordi character that maybe we haven't really gotten as much of before.
Yeah, I think that's right. Absolutely. Obviously, this is, we don't really know much about Geordi anyway. I mean, regardless of whether he's in the Mirror universe or, in the Prime universe. And so I think this was really interesting to kind of see what his backstory is, how he had made his way. He's been a part of the Stargazer with Picard, and then, he was been on Utopia Planitia as helping create the Enterprise D that we see. And this is an interesting story because it is all about, really, he's been put in this agony booth, and this person is torturing him, trying to get the truth out of him. And, we see, that he had this love story. This Geordi is much better with the ladies.
Yes, he is.
And So I do think that you're right in the sense that all of this is pretty interesting. The one thing that I would say, though, I think as fun as it was to see this about Geordi, I'm still left wondering, like, I'm not really sure what this whole series is supposed to be about and why it really exists as a story per the whole idea of like being in the Mir universe. Right. And, I feel like this issue was just kind of one that continues that trend. Like, oh, that's kind of cool, I guess, but I'm not really sure what this means for the rest of the series at all, or why we're even studying it. So it's a little bit strange to me.
Yeah. I mean, ultimately this was, as a one shot or kind of a standalone story goes, this fit in as to the point where I guess it's Inquisitor Troy is testing Geordi throughout this and learning more about his past, or showing us more about his past. But she's really doing this for Picard, I guess, for that greater story of, building the ships and everything. Which, was it necessary? No, I guess. But, I guess if they're going to be spotlighting these characters, he was a decent one, I guess, to go through.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's always interesting too. Like, is any of this necessary? No. I think, for me, as always, when it comes to tie-in fiction and stuff like this, it's the stories that make themselves feel the most necessary. Like where you read it and you're like, oh man, I could never look at the, TV show or whatever again the same way.
Right.
And I think, you struggle to find that with the Mirror Universe, I think, in the first place, because the Mirror Universe has so little effect on anything, really. So it's always more of a hard sell to me. And then, I think we've been pretty consistent in the sense that this series has just lacked a why. And one that it's been interesting, because we're getting farther into the series now, and I'm like, okay, when are we going to get there for that?
All right. Well, like Star Trek is known for giving good messages or kind of allegories to real life, and the Mirror Universe never was really great at that, like even in the TV shows to some extent. But especially when we're going to take the time and money to read these things, we kind of want to get a little bit of a Star Trek story out of it, and have a little fun with it, in the comics, and show some kind of odd storylines, I guess. But in some ways, you kind of got to ask, like, why is this necessary for Star Trek to do this?
Yep, absolutely. Well, so we had the other comic, which is Star Trek Klingons, and it is a one-shot. So we will not be getting more with this, but this was a very interesting story, I thought, because we are getting the myth of Kahless here, and something that we have never, I don't think, ever seen before. So what did you think of this one?
This one was a lot better. The artwork, like the whole thing was just a lot better. Like you said, we've never really gotten to see this story. We've heard it a couple different times, I feel like, between when the clone Kahless showed up on Next Generation, and then even when Kahless came back, or there was that episode of Deep Space Nine called The Sword of Kahless, where they kind of dove into the mythology a little bit more. But to actually see it, in this story form, and even to some extent get to see almost like why the Klingon symbol is that trifoil symbol, with these three tribes that he kind of brought together. It was just a really neat way to see inside the Klingon culture and into their mythology a little bit better. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, I think we're going to get more kind of alien spotlights, kind of like what they had done in the past with alien spotlights. And so, as far as you could say it's we can kind of get overrun with Klingon stories, throughout Star Trek, really, but especially in the recent years with when Discovery started. This didn't feel like that, like it was going back to the well or rehashing or just using the Klingons. Like I feel like this used the Klingons in a good way to start off what could potentially be really interesting spotlights into other alien races as well.
No, I agree with you, Casey. I think that this is something that was really interesting to read. And I think the only thing that I feel like might have made it slightly better is that some of the flashbacks made it a little bit difficult to kind of figure out exactly what was going on when until the very last page, where they kind of like give you everything in one, and then it makes things feel a little less clear in the sense of like Kalus's motivations and his and I think the other thing, and maybe this is on purpose, but he throws around the word honor like all Klingons do, and it seems that there isn't quite as clear of a definition from him as to what exactly that is. That's going to, like, that he's trying to inspire in the other Klingons. But, I mean, this also, too, feels much more like almost a mythology story.
Yeah. Where
Kalus came, to the bridge of the three ways, or I think that's what it's called, or something like that. And, he takes down all of these warlords and teaches the people a new way. I mean, so he's like, I guess, the Klingon Moses, but, with a lot more death involved. So
it really did feel like that kind of mythology. Like it almost seemed like a retelling. It's like somebody else retelling. Like, we don't really know exactly what Kalus was trying to teach us about honor, but we know that that's what was at the heart of what he was trying to tell us. And as we've seen through Star Trek, Worf even says that he throws around that word a lot, and it seems to mean whatever they need it to mean, whatever the Klingons need it to mean in any particular situation. And that was his way of kind of just bringing everybody together.
And I mean, for him, he's also kind of divorcing them from the idea of their, being gods and all of those kind of things, or anybody that they should be beholden to but themselves. And so it's like personal honor, I guess, is what matters. And then, of course, it's also weird because the last page kind of makes it clear that, is he really that honorable? Maybe, with what he did to his family. And so it is a really interesting comic. I think it's well done. And I mean, this is the kind of thing I think it is much more fascinating. And so, yeah, I really do enjoy it a lot. So, yeah. Well, Casey, that is our comic reviews for this episode here in the news. So I don't know, maybe we should explore a new world?
A new Earth, maybe.
Oh. So this series, Casey, is called New Earth, and the first book in that series is Wagon Train to the Stars, which, is fascinating for me to read this because this book reminded me a little bit of the series 1883 that I'd just been watching on Paramount Plus, where it is legitimately the story of people making their way on the Wagon Trail. And that's basically what this book is about. And so with the idea of, new worlds and going to a new world, basically like the pioneers of old and expanding the Federation, looking for freedom, how did you feel like first just about this as an idea for a series in the first place?
This is a pretty interesting idea for a story, and it's actually kind of interesting, especially when you put it kind of together with the book that we talked about, I think the last time I was on, or a couple times ago, with the Last Roundup, which was also about going and founding a colony. But the idea of taking 6 books to tell a story about going and founding a colony is, I mean, that really is kind of the going out there and exploring strange new worlds. And seeing what it would be like in the Star Trek universe to go and settle a new world. And so, to have this idea, in this narrative form, I guess, in these novels, is a really interesting way to tell it, because I don't think that this is something that would be as interesting to see on a TV show if they're just, months on end heading out to a new planet somewhere. I mean, there's a lot that happens in this book as far as setbacks and everything. And with as much time that passed in this book, I do kind of wonder, and I've read these books before, but I don't really remember anything from them. I wonder what's going to happen in the next 5 books, since, by the end of this one, they're pretty much to the planet. So, yeah, what was your initial thoughts, since I don't think you said you've read this before, right?
I haven't. And, I think the idea of going to colonize a new world, in expanding the Federation, basically like pioneers of old, I thought was a great idea for a story, and mainly too because in this time period, you do have the Federation, which is not as big as it is by the time you get to the next generation, where it just seems so expansive. Things are smaller. And there is much more frontier to what hasn't been explored in, the alpha and beta quadrants. And so I think, just the idea of creating a new Earth, for these people was really fascinating. I think it was really interesting in the book, and I wanted to get your take on this, Casey, because in the idea of going to a new world, I felt like there was a real lack of planning going on, and I was really surprised by this, because it didn't seem like the idea of Starfleet, or even the ability that you have to kind of scout something out and really know what it is in this time period is much different than back in the day. And so I don't know, it just seemed a little bit like this wasn't adequately planned.
Yeah, that was kind of I don't want to say problem with the book, my problem with the colonists, the governor, or whoever it was that decided that they were going to have this colony. I mean, it seems like they actually went to great lengths to not know where they were going. Like, they wanted to venture into the unknown, and there was some scouting that was done, but my thought is well, you've got all these starships going out there, exploring the unknown, trying to find charting these worlds and everything. Why wouldn't you want to capitalize on some of that? And they were kind of, I kind of wrote down in my notes here that they had hubris, essentially, is what was going on, that they were so eager to start this colony. They didn't really think everything through.
So you're saying they had sheer fracking hubris.
Exactly. Yes. But they clearly took a book out of, the pages of the old American settlers, because they didn't know, when they were going along the Oregon Trail, they didn't know exactly what they were going to find. And as much warning, I guess, as Starfleet was trying to give these people, and insisting that they take a Starfleet ship or some Starfleet ships with them, they were just they didn't want anything to do with it. They just wanted to get there and settle this planet and just deal with whatever came up. But space is a big place, and it's dangerous, and no one knows that better than Starfleet.
Mm-hmm. This is the thing that really kind of bothered me, I think, just about the book, because it's you have the ability to adequately survey areas, to really, and the fact that they had no idea that there were people in this area in the first place seemed strange, and to adequately they had some understanding of this gamma night sensor thing that happens because of the rotation of the planets and the star in this area. Okay, so they have some understanding of that. But I mean, to not know that there's any civilized life in this area, it's like, did you do no surveying of this planet and its surrounding planets and really do your due diligence before choosing this as a place to colonize? Because I can't imagine that actually not happening. And like you said, this felt like it was taking too much of a page from our past and trying to transplant that into the 23rd century, when the tools of the 23rd century and the abilities of people in the 23rd century are absolutely 100% totally different. And a lot of these things, especially, running into a whole civilization or two civilizations you didn't realize were there and were in a civil war, that just felt completely off to me.
Yeah. And I mean, I could almost understand them not totally understanding who was in the surrounding space, like in surrounding solar systems. But even in this one where this planet that they're going to go settle, like, it sounds like there's something up with the moons. Like, we still don't know a lot about the survey ship. One of the people on the survey ship that got destroyed by one of these alien cultures found that one of the moons was like hollow, and there was some sort of geomagnetic interference on the planet, or like, I don't know. It just seemed like it was going to be something that could potentially be dangerous. And so, like, okay, so you found a Class M planet, but did you not look at any of the other worlds yet in that?
Exactly. Like, in that solar system. To
settle Earth, when they find out if the moon's coming crashing into Earth soon. Like.
Yeah, I was so that part happened there, and it didn't really kind of jive, I felt like, with all of the things that we know about this time period. And then there was this really interesting and almost strange idea that these people want to kind of basically leave the Federation almost for more freedom. And yet, at the same time, like, I guess, they're also going to be joining the Federation as a colony later. And, like, I couldn't quite understand the motivations of exactly what they're after. If they're after, like, the sheer excitement of exploration and, being able to create their own world, and to experience life on another planet and basically have more land, all that kind of stuff. Like, I get all that, but I there was this real strange thought of, like, them creating their own laws and, all this kind of stuff, as if they're not truly free in the Federation, but then they want to join it later. And yes, I get each planet has its own laws in the Federation, right? But they still have to be laws that are consistent with the Federation, or else you can't join, I mean, so,
right.
Man, I don't know. It just seems very strange.
Yeah. I got the impression that there was kind of a lot of things going on. One, they wanted to prove that they could do it, which I think at some point somebody said, like, we need to show them how it's really done, and create our own society with our own laws. But yeah, they also did say that we're going to apply for Federation membership as soon as we get there. Then, well, I mean, you're Federation citizens now. Like, when are you not going to be Federation citizens?
Right.
And I get that this was like a private endeavor. They had privateer ships with them. They weren't having Starfleet ships take them to set up this colony. They wanted to do it as a private endeavor. So I get that. So I think it almost comes back to hubris again, that they wanted to go out just to prove that they could do it, and then kind of become this spaceport, I guess. They wanted to have this strong agriculture and, whatever else was going to come up there. But, in addition to the lack of planning they had and even finding it, like on the way there, they didn't even know, they didn't have any laws yet. And so as things kind of started coming up, like, Kirk would tell them, well, we're still in space. We're not to your planet yet. And you don't even they didn't even have any laws anyway. So like as some of these things started happening and going wrong, everyone was kind of just looking around for who's going to fix this. They didn't want Starfleet to do it, but the governor didn't know what to do because they hadn't done anything.
Yep.
And with even with characters like the Billy Maidenshore character, I think, he showed up, I think, because he wanted to be a thorn in Kirk's side, just from some of the little bit of backstory that we got with them.
Yes.
At the same time, the way the governor and some of the other people looked at it is that this was going to be a fresh start for everyone. So they didn't really look into the backgrounds of some of these people very closely because they thought, you know what, we're going to a new planet. People can kind of reinvent themselves when they get there. And we don't really see that with Maidenshore as much, but I do kind of wonder if that is, with these 60-some thousand people, if that is what some people were trying to just get a new start somewhere.
Well, and I think, the idea of I think even if, you're not somebody who's been in any trouble with the law or anything, the idea of getting a fresh start by going to a whole new planet and looking for that specifically, many people, went west in the United States because they wanted a fresh start. They wanted their own place. They wanted to create their own place, right? And their own sense of being. And I think all of that. And I think to me, as we kind of come back full circle, the original question I had asked us was, I get the idea then for this story. It makes sense. Like even in this time period, you still have people that have that pioneering spirit that they want to be the first place in a new planet and all that. I think all that is the stuff that really worked well. It was just, there seemed to be just a lot of things in this book that seems to be so badly thought through by the people going to do this, and then the planning for it just made absolutely no sense to me. So, and then, on top of that, the book really, I think, it's full of people that are just greedy. I mean, Maidenshore is the prime example of the fact that he's willing to turn over all of the colonists to the Orions for money. And everyone's just kind of using everyone that's not Starfleet. And, you even get the Bloods and the Clods, these two species that have been at war for a millennia. And they're also using each other and anyone that comes in contact with them to try and take each other out, and it was really interesting to me. And I thought that was an interesting thing to see just because it reminded me of like a ramped up version of the Harry Mudd character.
Oh, yeah.
So it's not as though Star Trek hasn't done this before and shown these characters who, these are the people who don't necessarily fit within the mold of a Federation type of citizen because they don't have any idea of wanting to be altruistic or help other people. They look only at what they can get, and they kind of remind us much more of the people that we come in contact with, almost every day. So this whole idea of like greed and what it does to people and how it hurts so many, I was really fascinated by, and I thought they actually one of the better parts of the story.
Yeah, it really did show a human element, especially when there was the lung flu or something that was going around on the one, or on multiple ships, I guess, and they only had a certain amount of medication to go around. And everybody wanted it right now and thought that they were more important than everybody else, just got super greedy with that. And I think that even just goes back into the planning of this thing. And, well, one, I mean, they were relying on Starfleet for medical assistance with the vaccine and with just treating all of the sick people. So I'm wondering, well, don't they have any doctors? Why were they accepting that help? But McCoy and the other doctors had this, I don't want to say quick fix, but they had the medication that was needed that, of course, then was being stolen and divvied out to other people who, weren't getting it yet. But yeah, I mean, it, just with this whole fleet of colonists, I mean, it started to seem like, everybody's got their own angle that they're working on this. And, with Maiden Shore and the Orions, that was the one that made kind of the least sense to me, just because everything we've ever known about the Orions, which isn't much at this point, in the Star Trek history, but I don't know what he thought he was going to get from the Orions.
Right.
Just,
yeah.
He's going to turn over, 60,000 people to become slaves.
I guess they were going to pay him really well or something. I don't know.
And not turn him into a slave.
Exactly.
I don't know.
I think, all that you're saying, especially like when it comes to like the medication, everything like that. I think one of the things about this book that was interesting, that it starts off with so many of these people being greedy, just always all out for themselves. They're all selfish. And what they realize here is that it takes working together the way Starfleet does and on their ships, all of these people working together as one to make it out in space. Like, you can't make it if all you're doing is looking out for yourself, which is, why the Federation shows us a society of people who are willing to work for the common good. And work towards those common goals. Doesn't mean people don't have, desires of their own and goals of their own or anything like that, right? But it's just about not being willing to take advantage of others to the detriment of others, because it's that symbiotic relationship, right? Yeah. And so that was something that was really interesting to kind of see. And again, I think that's what made this the most interesting part of the book, because there is all this rampant greed. And yet by the end of the story, the colonists are united with Kirk. And it's because Kirk and his crew and the crew of the other Starfleet ships have continued to show them that they are willing to put themselves on the line for them over and over again. And that if they want to survive, they need to start basically acting in that manner as well, because otherwise they're all going to die, and I think that's fascinating. And it's something that I think helps reinforce then the reasons why those type of attitudes weren't as prevalent in the 23rd centuries and beyond, is because they aren't conducive to actually being able to make it out in space. I mean, it's literally the thing that brought humanity together in First Contact, is when we realized we're not alone. That means we either unite as one or the universe will pick us off. Right. So, and that's exactly what these people learned, that same type of lesson. So I thought that was, when it comes to like thematic elements and everything with this story, I thought that was, again, the strongest part of the book, really, to me. So,
yeah, I agree. I thought that Kirk, especially because he was personally facing a lot of opposition from either the privateer captains or the captains of the ships that are hauling all these people. And I mean, Kirk and the Enterprise was really the only starship that went with him. And it was because Starfleet or the Federation, somebody told the colony, you will take them with you. They will help you. and it's your colony, whatever, but we're sending an escort with you. And Kirk really wanted to do that, partly just because he wanted to get back out there into the unknown and be a captain again. But
please don't make me sing Frozen 2.
I haven't seen.
Okay, there's a song called "Into the Unknown," so.
Oh, funny. But Kirk says multiple times in it, if people are going to die, Starfleet will be the first to die. If we're going to fight, Starfleet will be the first to fight. And proves to these people really over and over again that, they need Starfleet to at least to some extent. And I think in the end, what they needed from Starfleet was just that demonstration of what sacrifice looks like, or what the willingness to sacrifice looks like.
Yep.
And like you said, like working together. I'm sure that these people had the greatest intentions in the world, that they were going to work together once they got there. But when it really came down to it, they didn't know what that looked like. And so Kirk had to tell them, like, I'm putting a Starfleet person on every ship. Everybody needs to agree to act like Starfleet, until we get this Orion situation figured out. And then we'll be on our way. And that's essentially what saved them. And the people appreciated it. And it didn't help that the governor that they'd elected wasn't, he was a younger guy, maybe kind of inexperienced.
I mean, he's kind of an idealistic fool.
Exactly. Yeah. He wanted the best, but he also wasn't really sure what to do. He had no experience to, he didn't have anything to back up anything that he might say. And so kept looking to Kirk.
Yep.
And Kirk really did step up, I feel like, and show what real leadership looks like for the people, but also for the governor.
Yeah. See, I love that what you're saying about Kirk, because I think one of the beauties of what Kirk does in this is, obviously it's exciting for him. He steps down from Admiralty to lead this group, and part of that is his desire, I think, to be back out there, right? And that this seems like an exciting mission. This is Starfleet, right? To boldly go into a new era and to lead a group to create a new era for the Federation, like a new hope, hopefully, not to mention another Star franchise, but like that's his desire here. And I think that's really interesting. But I think, like, I really love what you were saying is the beauty here is that Kirk really does a good job of showing these people is that you need to be willing to willingly sacrifice your autonomy for the greater good. Again, otherwise you're going to die. Personal freedom, personal autonomy, totally good, right? But it's not the thing to which is actually always best, right? Like, and so Kirk kind of helps them see that idea of sacrifice, and sometimes even sacrificing our quote unquote freedoms for the good of others is important. And so, and that's a delicate balance. That's what it means to be a part of a free society, right? But coming together, I think, is really important. And I really appreciated that about the story. And again, I think it's one of those things that Kirk does really well, is that he helps exemplify what that looks like. And I think he also helps exemplify following good leadership and how important that is, and having good leaders that have experience, that have wisdom, that have the ability to truly, lead well because they've been through the fire. And, there's a little bit of that, I think, in the story, of that kind of like hero worship of Kirk in the story. But part of that is that Kirk and his crew have been out there more than anybody else. So they've seen the unknown, and they know how to face it. And yeah, I think Kirk is the one who, he's so stalwart in his beliefs. but he's also ready to back up those beliefs with his actions every minute of the day. And I think that's what wins the people over. And obviously, it's what keeps him alive, too. So,
yeah. This is the Kirk in this story is an interesting juxtaposition to the Kirk that we had in the last roundup, because they're both with him going to another colony, to a new colony. But the difference was in the last roundup, he felt kind of lost there because he wasn't in a leadership position. He was trying to let his nephews really take the lead, and they didn't want him to just be the leader. But here in this story, he really takes it on himself to be the leader when he sees that lack of leadership going on. And we've seen him do that, kind of strong arm his way into situations during the original series where I want to say it was the Omega Glory or something, where he's like, it's called freedom and you're going to like it.
Yeah.
And it's almost that Kirk that we get here, where he's like, I'm going to show you how to lead and you're going to like it.
Yeah. Well, and I think there is almost like a parental aspect to that, in the sense that, like, these people don't know how to lead, and it's going to get them killed. And what is fascinating, I highly recommend it to anybody, if you haven't watched 1883, you can see this. Like, there are the people that are leading these people to Oregon. They've done this before. They know what's out there. They know what they're going to face. And you're going to follow them, you're going to follow their rules, or you're not going to travel with them because they know what's happening. And it's the same thing. Like, I think it's very interesting what we get here is that it's written in that same aspect. Kirk is the leader. He's been out there. He knows what it is. And if you don't like it, you're going to die, basically. And that's exactly what almost happens to them, right? So I do have to ask you, so at the end of the book, we see that we might get embroiled in another people's war. We might get, smack dab in the middle. We're still going to go to Beltair, and the Bloods and the Quads may live in this area, and we might get embroiled in their war, but, well, we've ended one war and we can do it again, And I was just like, that's completely against the Prime Directive.
Yeah.
So what the heck?
Yeah, and I mean, to some extent, I mean, the people wanted to go to this planet no matter what, and Kirk may be, there's his hubris showing again, I guess, too, but if these people are so insistent on colonizing this planet, it almost doesn't matter if there's another war going on nearby or not, because there could be at some point. And if these people want to be so autonomous, maybe they do need to just get in there and experience it. And even though those races want to put, they wanted to put a base on the planet, but I guess we don't know what's going to happen. Like maybe they've only really talked to one side of this, the people in this conflict with the Blood, I think. And so maybe they could be friends with the Cowled or whatever they're called. And there is precedent, like, with they even reference in the book, the war between the Emeniar and the Vendikar. Right. And, because I think that was that computerized war where people just had to go to their deaths. And I mean, I don't know. Leave it to Kirk and the Enterprise crew, I guess, to finish a war for somebody else.
There you go. They'll solve it. If there was a problem, Kirk will solve it. Check out the hook my DJ revolves it. Ice, ice, baby. Anyway, okay. So the last thing I wanted to ask you, because the writing style of this book with Diane Carey, how do you feel about it? Because I found, in all honesty, the book somewhat confusing sometimes. And the writing style not very clear at others. And so I just kind of struggled with this book, because I felt like if it had been more clearly written, it would have been a better story altogether just with that alone. And I really struggled with this book.
Yeah, the timeline is what really got me, because I think the story takes place over many months. I can't remember how long they were saying it would take to get, because I think they had to go like warp 2, because that was as fast as their slowest ships could go.
Right.
And there's things that happen like either in the chapter breaks or in various places where it's just like, oh, we're like months later now, just because of something that kind of gets said in passing. And so that to me was very confusing. The other thing, Diane Carey was a very prolific Star Trek author back in the day. I want to say she wrote like 30 some Star Trek novels, mostly from the original series. But one of her big things was she brought in a lot of maritime language and jargon into her books, because that was something that she was very familiar with writing. I don't know if she's written those types of stories before, if she's got some history with that, but so she adds a lot of there's like boatswains and coxswains and other like positions on ships that we've never heard in Star Trek before and never will again. And really, I almost feel like there was a missed opportunity to have more terminology from like Westerns. We're calling this Wagon Train to the Stars, and they've got ships. One of the ships is called the Oregon Trail, but we didn't really lean into that as much as I thought we could have, like made this like a real Western in space, as far as like, like 1883 or whatever. And so I don't know, some of that stuff did kind of throw me out of the story a little bit sometimes, and just trying to wrap my head around what she was even saying sometimes. Yeah. I just did not love, this writing style, and you're right. I mean, she's absolutely a prolific Star Trek author. She's written so many books, and I think one of the things that you put on here too, when it came to like the idea of the story and the author here, is would this have worked maybe better in its own universe with original characters? And I do almost feel like a lot of this story, it was lacking a little bit of the Star Trek-ness to it. We've got Kirk there and everything, but this did almost feel like it would have been a more interesting story if it had been its own universe with original characters of, space pioneers, or if it had been set like in the 22nd century, early, before Warp 5 ships, were going out, like basically the Terra Nova type of thing. That's this type of story, right? I think that would have just been more interesting, because a lot of this story, and we talked about at the beginning, just didn't feel like it fit with what we knew of Star Trek, especially when you think of like Star Trek 2 and how meticulous they were in researching for the Genesis project, and it just felt odd. So yeah, I don't know. Yeah, and I almost wonder, because having the Star Trek characters, having the Enterprise in there, that did nothing for me in the story. They could have just replaced all of them with original characters, and I thought it would have been a fine book, like just kind of a sci-fi fantasy Western kind of hybrid. I do wonder if we hadn't had these new, and I understand they're trying to create a world for this 6-book arc that they're going to have. And so bringing in familiar foes maybe isn't really a path they wanted to go down. Like, we didn't want the Klingons to be the bad guys, or the Romulans or somebody. But I do feel like that might have grounded it a little bit more in the Star Trek universe, rather than having these just original aliens that, once again, could have belonged to any universe other than Star Trek. I mean, this could have been a Star Wars novel or something. And so I do feel like it kind of missed the mark on, yeah, you said it perfectly. The Star Trek-ness just wasn't there.
Yeah, absolutely. So, well, Casey, I'm really interested. What would you rate this book then?
This was a hard one for me to rate. I was really going back and forth between a 2 and a 3. Not a very. I ended up giving it a 3 just because about halfway through reading this book is when I kind of thought about maybe this isn't a Star Trek story. And when I kind of turned my mind on that a little bit, it made it actually a little easier to kind of get through the rest of the book and let me appreciate some of the other things that were going on in it, rather than trying to figure out, like, why is this a Star Trek book, or why is this, a Kirk story or whatever. So I gave it, I would say, a very weak 3. But I didn't really want to, I felt like it was maybe a little bit better than a 2. And since Goodreads doesn't do half stars, I gave it the benefit of the doubt and gave it a 3.
Yeah. This story, I talked about the strength of the idea of the story, what we're trying, just when you say this out loud of like, this is what the book series is about. I think it's a strong idea. And I think the execution here is just off. And that's frustrating because I don't want it to be. I want there to be a better connection, and just honestly, I want it to be a better written story. I give this a 2.5, and so on Goodreads you'd see it as a 2 because I think it's more of a 2 than it is a 3. And I'll give it a 2.5 because I feel like it's half a good idea and story. It's just the other half of that execution just is too far off for me to say it's above average, and in all honesty, I would say probably 2.5 is me being generous. So, but yeah, I mean, I'm still actually excited to see where this story goes. And I think hopefully, we have kind of a rocky start, as all main pioneering adventures do in real life. And so hopefully it'll be better moving forward.
So Star Trek series always tend to have a little bit of a rough start, and this one isn't a stranger to that. But like you said, it's going to be nice to get to see what else happens in this series. And I don't know, it's just exciting to be back in the original series after all those 24th century adventures. And got more on the way and more series to go coming up.
Yeah, no, I'm right there with you. I'm actually excited to continue with this. I love the movie era of the Star Trek, of TOS. And so to be in that, it's really exciting to me. I just, the idea of being on the Refit Enterprise in the first place is great. So no, I am excited to continue with this. And Casey, if people, want to catch up with you and talk about this or anything else Star Trek related, or see what else you've got going on, where would they find you?
I am on Twitter, Instagram, Goodreads, and Letterboxd at Knitting Trekkie. I can also be found poking around in the Babel Conference on Facebook. And I am also on a podcast called Mickey's Marvels, where we discuss everything under the Disney umbrella, and recently just talked about the Book of Boba Fett.
Nice. That's awesome, man. Well, hopefully everybody will check that out. And then, of course, you can find me on the social medias under the name MattRushing02, Letterboxd, Instagram, Twitter, Vero, all of those type of places. You can also find me here on the network, of course, in our whole other side of the network devoted to things outside of Star Trek, the 602 Club. We're talking about all of the fandoms we love. We got some great bonus shows in there as well. It's a great feed to check out, so hopefully you will. You can also find me doing The Orb as well as Warp 5. So The Orb is about Star Trek Deep Space Nine, and Warp 5 is about Star Trek Enterprise. Chris and I are talking about every single episode of the series, celebrating its 20th anniversary, and you'll want to look for it, but Star Trek Picard. We're going to be talking about that soon as Season 2 is in full force now. So look for the latest on Star Trek Picard coming very soon. And you can find me over on the Nerd Party Network. I did a finished show called Owlpost with Drea Kaufman, as we talked about every single chapter of the Harry Potter series, one chapter at a time. And then John Mills and I talked Star Wars on Aggressive Negotiations, so you'll want to check that out as well. But thank you so much for joining us. And until next time, live long.
And read on.
What do you call that, light reading? To each his own, number one.